My name is Robert Sewell. I'm head engineer and producer here at Orb Recording Studios. So I've been doing this for about 2 years now, and as I think back at all the milestones that I've hit so far, you know, my first one being buying my first mic at Guitar Center, to joining the school, to recording my first client, to graduating school, then I landed my job here, which was crazy. I couldn't believe, and it keeps getting better all the way up till last week when I got my first #1 album. So I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of awesome artists, but there's a couple sessions that come to mind. The first one was probably Skrillex. You know, before working with him, I was such a huge fan of him, loved what he was doing, and he was so down to earth, so cool, amazingly talented, learned so much from him. But above that, we really clicked even outside the studio. So we'd work, you know, all night or whatever and go back to his hotel, hang out, go to his shows, and just hung out with him and his whole crew, and they're awesome. Another session that I really enjoyed was probably the Pentatonix session, and that because I know it sounds silly, but they were one of the bands that inspired me to get into music. I discovered them on YouTube way back in the day when they were doing their thing, and I loved what they were doing, and I wanted to do it. You know, I wanted to make songs and videos and do all that. And fast forward a couple years, and now I'm working with them. So it was really cool for me. So crazy studio stories. One of the first ones that comes to mind was during South by, and we had just opened, we weren't expecting anything, and just this huge flow of artists came in. And it was pretty much just me, but we had just a ton of huge artists like Justin Bieber and Lil Wayne and a bunch of major label artists. And I was doing all these sessions. I'd be in a session all day and then be in a session all night, and I wasn't sleeping, and it was just chaos. And so I ended up going all week, not sleeping, just doing all these crazy sessions. And then at the end of the week was our big party, and so we're all celebrating, and I was like, man, I finally get to go home, sleep. And then it was like 10 o'clock at night, everyone's cleaning up, and we get a call from Atlantic Records, and they wanted to send one of their artists in all night. And I slammed a 6-pack of Red Bull and did the session and ended up passing out for like 2 days straight. But that was our grand opening, and you know, me getting into Orb, it was crazy. My biggest influence would be Max Martin. When I think of inspiration or someone that continues to push me to want to be the best, I think about him and his whole crew. So I was really fortunate to work on a couple tracks for DMC on his upcoming album, and he influenced me in a big way because he was someone I really looked up to and respected, and I grew up listening to him, and he gave me some major props that I'll never forget. And you know, that's one of those things at the end of the session, you kind of sit back, take a deep breath, and be like, okay, maybe I am doing something right. Another musical influence of mine is a producer, Noel Zancanella, and I was fortunate enough to work with him on a session and assist. And he's an awesome producer and songwriter, and you know, one of the big tips that I took from him was not to be afraid to break rules and to step out of the box and do stuff that's cool and original. And one specific example is on one of the Adele records that they're working on. He recorded the acoustic guitar with an iPhone. And when you think about that, it's like crazy. Like, you're in an amazing studio with all these nice mics and gear, but he chose to use an iPhone. And for me, it was just like, man, don't be afraid to try things and break rules and do stuff that you're just feeling in the moment. So probably one of the most meaningful sessions so far to date would probably be the Justin Bieber session, just because that was my first like big session. I got thrown in the deep end. Everyone had a great time. You know, he had a ton of great producers here, one being Mike Dean, who I really look up to, and he was great to work with. Justin himself was super cool, humble, great guy, super talented. You know, I've always been a fan of his, so it was cool to work with him and see that side of him. And still to this day, he's probably, you know, one of the most talented people I've ever worked with. So how did I land this job at Orb? Well, I was freelance engineering a lot here in town. And I ended up doing a session with Matt Noveski, who is the bass player for Blue October. He also produces a lot. We did a session together, hit it off. I stayed in touch with him. And then I think it was about a year later, he came to me and said, hey, me and my partner were opening a studio and wanted me to jump on board. And still to this day, I do all of the sessions with him and kind of his right-hand man. So my final advice to any aspiring engineers or producers is to just work really hard, continue getting better at your craft, work every day at it. Don't ever think your way is the right way. Don't ever think that you know it all. And just continue to build those relationships and just work with as many different people as you can. And before you know it, you'll look up and you'll be right in the middle of it.